Hello, and welcome to the Doof Book Club, our monthly live stream discussion of a book chosen by you, our listeners. My name is Matt Freeman, and I'm joined as always by my dream patient, Scott Daly. Scott, what did you dream about?
Oh, Matt, it was a pretty scary one this week. I dreamed that the leader of a foreign country that's currently at war with a dictator came to us for help, and our president and his vice president yelled at him like petulant children. Why? What happened?
Nothing. Nothing. Nothing at all.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. We hope you're having a wonderful Friday evening. I'm sure I see a lot of familiar names in the chat right now. But if you are new here, hello, we are Doof Media. We make podcasts all about the stories we love. We also organize and arrange this monthly book club. Matt, what is a book club?
Well, each month, Scott and I select 5 books from a pool submitted to us by our wonderful Doof community. We put up a poll for all of our supporters on Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia, and we'll let them vote on which they'd like us to talk about. The book with the most votes wins, and then we all read it.
And then we meet here on the last Friday of the month and spend an hour or so chatting about the book. We do have a little bit of homework to do before we get into the book, though, because one of the things we also do is we let people who attend the book club live to also vote in the poll. So I'm sending a poll right now in the chat of this very episode, and you folks should be able to vote for 2 of the 5 choices. We will add these votes to the votes from our Patreon, and that's how we will come up with the book we're covering next month. So we will announce that at the very end of the show. But first, we've got a lot of things to talk about. Matt, what book are we talking about this month?
This month, we are talking about The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula K. Le Guin. The summary is as follows. In a future world racked by violence and environmental catastrophes, George Orr wakes up one day to discover that his dreams have the ability to alter reality. He seeks help from Dr. William Haber, a psychiatrist who immediately grasps the power George wields. Soon, George must preserve reality itself as Dr. Haber becomes adept at manipulating George's dreams for his own purposes.
Matt, this is the 5th Ursula K. Le Guin book we've covered on Book Club since we started. I believe that's true. We did The Left Hand of Darkness, The Dispossessed. We did the first 2 Earthsea novels, and then this. So we are Le Guin fans, I think it's safe to say. What did you think of this book? And while Matt is letting me know, I also want to hear from you folks out here in the chat. I see Aqualung, I see Bent Westward, I see Barrett, I see Farmer, I see Bishop, a lot of familiar names. Liam, what did you guys think of The Lathe of Heaven? Matt, what did you think of The Lathe of Heaven?
Well, I loved it about as much as I expected to. As a huge Le Guin fan, it was everything I expect from her. Really kind of fresh seeming ideas, despite the fact that it's quite an old book. Um, Very literary style, very beautiful, well crafted prose that really sucks you in. Very psychologically deep and realistic characters, nuanced philosophical ideas. Really, just everything you expect from Le Guin.
Yeah.
And uh, we're gonna have a good conversation. What did you think?
I really enjoyed this book. I don't know if I could comfortably say like where this ranks amongst Le Guin. I still think like The Left Hand of Darkness was one of the most pleasurable reads I've had in my entire life. So that's a tall thing to stack up to. But I really enjoyed this book. I think one of the things that we have to talk about, and maybe here at the very beginning is just the place to do it, is the fact that this book came out in I think 1971, and then the concept of this book has been, I'm not going to say copied, because I don't think it's like a person's dreams become reality is like something that was stolen from Le Guin, but like just this science fiction concept has been done again and again and again and again and again in the years since this book came out, to the point where this is something that I think we've seen a lot. I mean, hell, we just covered a movie on Flanagan's Wake a few weeks ago that was a twist on this concept. But of course, Le Guin does it and takes it in her usual manner of really diving in and exploring what it means to be a person, what it means to live in a country, a society, a government, a world. And I thought it was beautiful.
Yeah. For me, something that jumped out to me, having read The Left Hand of Darkness and connecting it to Left Hand of Darkness, was this idea of sort of Eastern versus Western perspectives and philosophies, where Dr. Haber is obviously the avatar of the Western philosophy of sort of a rationalistic approach to identifying like what are the problems, and then let's fix the problems, and let's be scientific. Let's take things that exist and purpose them to our own needs and solve the problems. And George Orr is, not explicitly a Taoist, right? Like he's not explicitly anything, but there is a real Eastern flavor to. It's almost like the universe picked him as the dreamer, as the one who had this power because of the fact that he just had this nature, that
Mm-hmm.
he had this unique equanimity and balance and centeredness that allowed him to just be the jellyfish, um, being swimming gently through the deep water,
Yeah. Yeah.
just being part of it. That it's funny. I kept mentally returning to that opening image of the jellyfish throughout the whole book. Um, it was a metaphor that I found kind of expanded itself in different ways as I was reading.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that to me is the thesis of the book. I guess that's a good place to start. But
Yeah.
the characters are also really, really interesting.
Yeah.
Lots
Uh,
of people liked it. Go ahead.
yeah, I mean, I just see a lot of people saying this is their first Le Guin in chat, and that makes me happy that you've got to experience this wonderful author. But I think I don't know. Do you think this is an interesting first foray into Le Guin, or do you think this is a good place to start? Actually,
Yeah, I'd say this is a good place to start. I mean, the interesting thing is, this is just my opinion as of this moment, is this is like solidly in the middle of the pack of the Le Guin books that I've read.
it's fair.
Where and I mainly say that because I loved The Left Hand of Darkness and The Dispossessed so much. I mean, I think The Dispossessed is probably in my top 3 or 5 books that I've ever read, maybe. Um, and then the Earthsea books I liked very much, but
Mm-hmm.
they're just not quite, they didn't quite hit as hard for me.
Sure.
And so like this is a good, this book also is sort of more, it has more of a plot than for example, um Left Hand of Darkness. Certainly, like Left Hand of Darkness is a very unusual book. I think it's delightful, but it's like you're often feeling very lost and kind of floaty. This book actually has a bit of a thriller vibe
Yeah.
to it, almost, where it's it, like Orr is kind of paradoxically the least appropriate character in the universe to be a thriller protagonist, but it is sort of like he's been caught in the web of this doctor who's exploiting him, and there's a lot of the tension is like, how is he going to get out of this? Uh, how is the world going to get out of the manipulative clutches of this power hungry doctor?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think Le Guin does some really interesting things with character perspectives in that, especially early in the book when, like, the book does not kind of directly immediately call attention to the fact that the picture on the wall has swapped.
mm-hmm.
It like leaves you to kind of catch up on that yourself and then dives into it explicitly later. But just the way, like, the first time Orr goes into the office, we're seeing things from his perspective. The second time we're seeing things from the doctor's perspective, and then I think the third time we're seeing things from the lawyer's perspective, and that allows us to not be quite clear what the other characters are thinking in the moment, and it just allows the tension of what do they know and don't know, what happened, what like, so often we are not able to see the commands that are being given to Orr from Haber, so like we just don't know what's going to happen, and that leads to a lot of tension constantly of like, wait, what did he do now, what's going on? And like, just this, like, the subtlety of, earlier he's complaining about his office never has a window, and then the next time we see him, he's sitting in an office looking out of his window, and you're just like, wait a minute, what happened? I just think Le Guin has a field day with that kind of stuff. Like, there's a different version of this book, I think, where you just are very explicit with all that thing, and you're not trusting your audience as much to catch up. But I think she does it beautifully here.
Yes, very subtle with all of that. I really love some of the ideas of change of identity, change of like who you are is defined by the world that you have grown up in. I
Mm-hmm.
can't remember the exact moment because I finished this book a few weeks ago, but like there's a moment kind of toward the end where we're in sort of I think the last world before everything goes to hell, and it's the one where everyone is gray, and Haber has like he's like the most important man in the world basically,
Yeah.
and you can legally kill someone if they're ill.
Yeah. Yeah. Citizens arrest, leading to euthanasia if you detect someone has cancer.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that and okay, so that's what it was. That's what I was trying to remember. Is like he then defends that to Orr as being like a reasonable idea,
Yeah.
when in fact like it's obvious that whatever it was that he told Orr to change, he did not intend for that to be the outcome, right?
Yeah.
But now he is like he's in this world, and to him to the him that has lived in this world, that seems like a reasonable thing to do now.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's defending it, even though it's a horrible, evil thing,
Yeah.
and which he inflicted upon the world. And it's not even that he's like retroactively justifying it. It's like for this version of Haber, that's always seemed like a reasonable idea.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I just love that Le Guin does this, because I think, like, you compared it to The Left Hand of Darkness, and I think that's very astute. But I also kept thinking about The Dispossessed while I was reading this book, because The Dispossessed is in many ways like this book, something examining the idea of utopia and what it takes to achieve a sort of utopia. What are the costs of that? And she always does it by having characters that have grown up on both sides of these arguments and vehemently like believe that they're right, that their way of the way that they're doing things is the correct way, is the good way. And like I think it takes a lot of effort and care to craft characters in a way that is I think ultimately still like shining a light on ultimately what I think Le Guin believes about all these things, but doing so in a way that always feels like fair. Like I was obviously, this is like at large a book about like what happens when you try to fix the world, and the ways in which these often noble attempts to fix the problems of the world, to make a better world, spiral out into something you could never have foreseen. I think Bent Westward calls it like a monkey's paw concept with a be careful what you wish for, which is exactly true, but operating in a like, we think of utopia as this like grand goal to aspire to. And I love, by the way, the title of this book, like The Lathe of Heaven, is just delicious, because like, what is a lathe, right? What does it do? Well, it's a spinning tool that you put something on, and to make something, you have to destroy it, essentially. You have to carve pieces off of it. You have to go in there, like if you put the concept of heaven in the lathe, how do you make it? By ripping pieces out of it, by destroying pieces out of it, by carving pieces off of it. And those pieces are people and ideas and concepts and all these things. And it's just beautiful.
Another angle on that metaphor is you're reshaping it in a way where you can't ever go backwards.
Yeah,
you know?
no, yeah, very fair. Yeah.
I suspect no matter how good you are at pottery, you can't go backwards. I like that a lot. Yeah. So what you were saying about utopia, like and particularly what you were saying about the characters' positions all feeling reasonable. Dr. Haber is simultaneously like clearly the villain.
Yeah.
And like, but also very like reasonable and not a caricatured villain, right? He's everything he says. There's a huge part of me that I have to admit is nodding along, and is in fact like borderline saying like, yeah, if you had access to a magical thing that could transform the world, it's your duty to use that to alleviate people's suffering. Like all of my training as a science fiction reader has has cultivated this desire to be like, yes, we are the masters, and we can fix the problems, right? We what are you, a coward? You're not going to seize the power and try to fix the world, and you relate to his desire to do that, and and then when he starts doing it and messing things up, you even relate to his feeling of like, okay, I see what I did wrong there. All right, next time I'm gonna tinker with the machine, and I'm gonna be very specific about what I say, and we're gonna do the hypnotism different, and we're gonna get it right. We're
Yeah.
gonna get it right. And like part of you totally like you're reading the book, so you're standing outside of the situation, and you're like, this is not gonna work. But part of you totally understands him, and indeed would be in his position, right?
Yeah.
It, like,
Yeah, I mean,
and yeah,
he's the John Hammond of this novel, and I mean the movie Hammond, not the book
uh-huh,
Hammond.
yeah,
Where his ultimate flaw is hubris, is this idea, this thinking that he alone can do this. Like, I agree with you. Like, I kind of loved the idea, like the broad idea of like, how do we conquer prejudice and racism in this country? Well, or this world rather. Well, we could spend thousands and thousands of years of evolving and dealing with our shit, and finally getting to a place where we don't have these innate, but both like learned prejudices, or we could just make everybody the same color.
mm-hmm.
And like, he's like, look, this solved the problem, because in this world there was never a problem to begin with. And of course the result is everyone is boring and the same. Like, the choice of making us gray,
Mm-hmm.
so perfect, because it's just like, everyone's, there's no racism anymore because we all look the same. But like, the race and culture and these things that we fight over incessantly, and we've like hurt people over, are also like a cornerstone of what makes this world unique and beautiful and different. And like, it's just like, it's an ingrained part of humanity, and just stripping that away for the sake of solving racism is ultimately like bad, I think, is the argument of the book.
Yeah, I mean, we see, for example, that the woman in the book, the lawyer whose name I'm blanking on, um,
Wow, yeah, I can't remember
she
names
she
either.
she
What's her
doesn't
name?
exist anymore in kind of the Lalash. She
Yes,
doesn't
thank you.
exist anymore in one of the, I think, like the second to last version of reality, because her sort of nature as a person is so defined by the racial dynamic between her parents and her own racial makeup, that she as a person fundamentally can't exist in that world anymore. And so you have, by stripping the color out of the world, you've made it impossible for certain things to exist at all, certain people to exist at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then he kind of brings her back. I thought that was interesting, tangent, but like I thought it was really interesting how he kind of dreams her back into existence, but also it's kind of
He
not
changes
her.
her. He changes
Yeah,
her. He softens her. Like, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Because the I think the truer version of her can't exist in that reality. So he makes a version of her that's kind of softened, but um, hugely tragic, by the way. I just have to say how sad it was that, like, despite the fact that I know that he kind of just invented this woman, like, due to the rules of the way the story works, it doesn't matter. She still had a whole lifetime,
Yeah.
and they had a whole life together, and they were happy together, and they seemed like a great couple. He seemed happy. It was
Yeah.
one of the only times in the book he seemed happy was after he dreamed her up, and it was like, oh yeah, of course, that's my wife. She's always been there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when she went, I was really sad at the end when the universe unraveled, and he lost her again, and kind of knew that he wouldn't ever be able to get her back. But then the book, it's kind of a bittersweet ending where he's gonna try to pursue kind of the other version of her, but it's like
Yeah.
it's not her. It's not the
It's
same. Not the
it's
same one.
it's the ending of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Is
Mhm.
essentially exact. Every story has copied the story essentially. Yeah, I Bent Westward says, I got a lot of disturbing fascism vibes. Is it worth sacrificing free will for a dark utopia? Yes, exactly. I think Le Guin, between this and the Dispossessed, I am now utterly convinced that Le Guin is just very, very suspicious of the concept of utopia.
Yeah.
I think especially Utopia as it originates from like the one great man of history concept, right? You know, someone's gonna come in and they're gonna make everything right. They're gonna execute even with altruistic desires. They're gonna come in and craft something. I think it is very important that the book exists in a place where things aren't good, right? The opening of the book, things aren't good. There's rampant overpopulation. I do think it's very funny that in 1971, 7 billion people was like, there's no possible way we could exist functionally as a society with 7 billion people on the planet. And it's like, oh, well, we kind of did that. So there's still, people aren't quite starving
Yeah.
everywhere. There's a lot of starving in our world, but um, that
Yeah.
is not that has nothing to do with the population and the
Right.
ability to create food. That's a distribution problem.
It was a very popular idea in the 70s and 60s that like the world was going to become horribly Malthusian,
Mm-hmm.
and we needed to undertake, some terrible sacrifices to avoid that, which
Yeah.
I think is directly tied to her skepticism of utopia, or just maybe phrased differently, her skepticism of like far-reaching ideological programs
Mm-hmm.
where it's like we're going to remake society according to blank, where I don't care what blank is, like what you're going to do is kill the huge number of people
Yeah.
and then declare victory because yay, we did it. um I mean, I'm still, so this is a real tangent, but I'm really shocked by how many people you encounter who think that Anaris from The Dispossessed was like a utopia, and that Le Guin thinks that that was a good idea, and that
Yeah.
that was her idea of a good outcome. Like to me, Anaris in The Dispossessed, the planet is the gray world at the end of this movie, where it's like, yeah, this is the hellhole that you create if you get your way.
Yeah.
You get exactly what you asked for, good and hard. Um, Tons of people don't realize that about Anaris. I think this book is more successful at conveying that, like, yeah, you stripped out all of the color
Yeah.
from the world,
Mm-hmm.
and yes, I guess there's less suffering, but there's also like no people, and the people who are there are drab and boring.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah,
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I just personal feelings aside, like I can't read that book without clearly seeing that it's a comparison of two states that are neither ideal.
hmm
The planet and that its moon are both not places that I would want to live.
right,
Um, I think it is really interesting in this world in particular, kind of going back to how she uses the concept of dreams and dreaming. Like there are many people out there that dream to end hunger, to dream to build a better world, right? Like using the word dream, but not meaning literally falling asleep, but like this is the dream of many people, and I think the monkey's paw of it all is that like any system that you create or idea you have or ideologic I ugh, I can't talk. Is limited by kind of the fact that the person dreaming it is a person who has somewhat control over who they are, but also has the subconscious in them. Like I love the idea of George Orr, who was not a bad person at all, a decent person, but he has the subconscious that just kind of goes and does its own thing.
yeah,
um, and just the idea that like even in your best efforts, like to create a system, not just in the dream world, but just in real life, in people's best efforts to create a system or do something or pass some new idea that's going to protect people, it's warped and shaped by the broader consciousness of the world that it exists in. So
yeah.
it's never going to be this perfect thing that you imagined in your head when you closed your eyes. It's just not going to be that.
I love that connection. I don't know if I quite consciously understood that, but yeah, it's like it's the exact reason why real people get disillusioned with politics is, like you said, they have a dream, or rather they have an articulation of the change they want to make,
Yeah.
and they dream of it, and then it goes through the process, and then this warped, disfigured version of it comes out the other side,
Yeah.
and they're like, oh god, That's not what I wanted at all. But that's the way everything works in this world. You don't ever dream and then get exactly what you imagined in your waking life. I
Yeah.
love that connection there.
Aqualungfish says the failure point of any plan is when you introduce people to it. I think
Yeah,
that's perfect. Yeah.
yeah. I think my favorite twist was I told you to dream of peace on Earth, and we did it. And for some reason, I now know a lot about the word cislunar space combat. Um, that was just I like.
I mean,
Uh,
I loved it because, and I don't know whether my dad like read this book or this was just a conversation my father and I had a lot when I was a kid. But this idea of like, I remember him and I having talks about like what could unify every nation on this planet, right?
mhm.
And like, my dad's a little bit of a pessimist, and I think his general idea is and always has been like, well, some external, like what unifies people together really well, some external threat,
Mhm.
some other outside of our group sure unifies us. I mean, there was that brief moment post 9/11. This faded very quickly, by the way, but there was a brief moment in America that post 9/11 we were, as a country, all like, yeah, George Bush is awesome,
Yeah,
actually, let's go.
right. Our
And
political differences don't matter that much after all.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so like just the concept of that your subconscious mind would just be like, yeah, aliens. I mean, this is exactly what my dad said. It's like, I bet you if we get invaded by aliens, we would unify real quick. And so, yeah, I'm gonna need to ask my dad if he read this book. But I mean, the problem is this concept was. I don't even know if I'm comfortable saying originated here. I think this is just a concept that is used again and again and again
Yeah,
in fiction.
feel like it might have been like a Heinlein thing. Just a thought. I don't actually
Probably,
know.
yeah. My
You,
dad
you,
read a lot of
you're
Heinlein,
right,
so
William. His William's. Wait, your name is William. The character's name is William. You're right, William. Haber's Dr. Haber's mistake was not prompting the LLM to come up with a better prompt for the dream. Um,
we should do that and see what it says.
yeah, yeah. I need a really specific. I enjoyed the hypnotism angle and how much time we spent on that because I've done my own researches into hypnotism and I just think it's a fascinating idea and I think it's fascinating for the same reasons that Le Guin does, which is like it is a it is like a crack in the door into the subconscious and into the deeply uncanny world of like what is happening under the hood.
Yeah.
And but it like and it's easy to think like, oh, this is an amazing tool that I found. I'm gonna but like as far as in my experience, hypnotism never ends up being useful or powerful in the ways that you imagine it would be because basically your brain is just like Orr's brain in the book, where it's just kind of it's everything under the surface is a lot wobblier and more abstract than you imagine. I know I'm being very vague here, but like I love the idea of hypnotism, and you rarely encounter hypnotism. I feel like I don't know. I feel like hypnotism is just not talked about at all anymore. Like,
Yeah, it's kind of gone out of vogue, I think.
which is weird because it's not like it's made up. It's not like it's fake. It's just you're right. It's just gone out of vogue for whatever reason.
Yeah.
It's a cool thing though.
I find it terrifying, yeah, because like you like to feel like you have control over yourself and your how you interface with the world, and then this idea of that you could just be completely completely manipulated by the it's scary.
Mhm.
I've never been hypnotized. Have you ever been hypnotized?
Well, I've played around with self hypnosis, which, um, you know, there's lots of resources to figure out how to do that. I've never been hypnotized by a third party, and I agree with you that being hypnotized by a third party sounds terrifying because it sounds like sacrificing a lot of control.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like I totally have successfully hypnotized myself, um, and like it works. Like it's not, it's real. So
That's yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I don't doubt it's the reality of it. I don't like it.
yeah, yeah.
So I think Qualified Cornstarch asks an interesting question here, Matt. If I loved Earthsea, would I like this book? That's a tough question, actually. I mean, I think if you appreciated Le Guin's writing, I think you would like this book.
Mm-hmm.
Like just the way Le Guin like stretches sentences together and describes things and tells her stories. I think you would, but I think this is such a different kind of book.
It is a very different kind of book. I suspect. I mean, I suspect the answer is yes. If you're the kind of person who enjoys that kind of like slower paced cerebral story.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even though the Earthsay books are like fantasy, they're still very slow and ruminative and like about ideas and about character growth, which I think, this book qualifies as. If I was going to recommend like my favorite, it's funny, you basically implied that your favorite Le Guin book is Left Hand of Darkness, and
Yeah.
I just said mine is The Dispossessed. So I would probably recommend one of those two as like the next one over this one, and not because there's any problem with this one. It's just like those were kind of both all timers. I think they both are probably in the top 5 or 10 of like books ever that I've read.
Yeah, I think at the very beginning, Aqualungfish stated that they kind of bounced off of the Left Hand of Darkness early, and I think that's completely fair. I do remember the beginning of that book being nearly indecipherable, and you really just have to push through it until you finally start to like understand what's going on and what Le Guin is doing. Mm-hmm. So I say that only as like a warning if you decide to go with the Left Hand of Darkness.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think The Dispossessed didn't have that particular issue, but definitely rewarding. Left Hand of Darkness is rewarding once you get past that point.
For sure. My gosh, I feel like I'm overwhelmed with things to talk about, and I don't know where to go next.
Yeah. So there's that's me too.
Oh no.
Yeah.
This has never happened before.
It's true. Quick, audience, help. Yeah. I think George Orr's character is a good thing to focus on.
All right, let's go.
More.
Yeah,
okay, we can do turtle talk next. For now, George Orr, in some interesting ways, kind of reminds me of the protagonist of Left Hand of Darkness, whose name is I. I think that's why I thought of it, is like his name is I, this guy's name is Orr, and Le Guin likes these names that are like a explosive sound, or the book itself even makes this connection where it's like Orr is such an equivocating name. Mm-hmm. It's like Haber. I think this is intentional. Haber, I think that means have, like, or haver, one who has.
Yeah.
He's going to take. It's kind of like Dr. Haber is somebody who's going to take and impose. And George Orr, first of all, George Orr, it's this very fascinating sound, right?
Yeah,
in your mouth.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah,
but or it's like I don't know, either or. Well, one it could go either way. No opinion, no strong feelings. I'm from the neutral planet. I wonder if the people of the neutral planet are based on George Orr because they're gray. Talking about Futurama.
Oh. I mean, maybe. Jesus, who knows?
Maybe. Those people are pretty smart, so perhaps. Yes, it was George Goodall did the audiobook. He did a really good job. I liked him. He was a later the later Dark Tower books too.
Mm-hmm.
George, back to George Orr for a second.
Okay.
So, really interesting choice to have him be a protagonist, just because he's like the ultimate passive protagonist.
Yeah, he's super passive. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Yeah,
super passive, and like the struggle is like you as the reader like want to shake him because you're like, stop going back to the guy.
Yeah.
And he just keeps doing it, and I'm not even sure if he like really properly has an arc. Actually, this is a question. Here's a question. Like, what does he decide to do at the end? Like, why does it? What is the climax of this story?
Well, I mean, the universe is collapsing because Haber got the power, and after one dream, just completely destroyed everything.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Let's back up a second to just before that. When he gives Haber the power, I felt like he thought he knew what he was doing
Yeah.
and clearly did not.
Yeah.
And that was weird to me.
So okay, here's so essentially what happened, like everything happens the way Haber kind of predicted it would, right? Like I need one last data source for you, one last dream, and then I'll be able to replicate this thing, and then I will have you dream a dream that means you forget how to do this thing, and boom, you're cured. And that's exactly what ends up happening. And yeah, I think you are incredibly frustrated with Orr because you're like, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Didn't you just decide last time that this would be bad, and you're doing it anyway? Yeah, I mean, I think that is his passivity there, but it is literally not until like the exact thing that both we and he predicted would happen, which is the second Haber gets this power, he's going to use it terribly. That starts happening, and then suddenly George is like, "Oh, I gotta go stop it now." And I was like, "Well, you could have done that. You could have done that a week ago, 2 weeks ago, a year ago." Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. So, and I don't know what to do with that. Like, as much as I love the
Yeah.
book, this isn't like a critique, really. It is a, uh, what does this mean? Like,
Yeah.
what does it mean that he went through with it? I mean, is that just part of the sort of Taoist go with the flow? Like, well, if Haber destroys the universe, then I guess that's what was supposed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But like that doesn't feel right either, because he does go back and he like does the very brave thing of like walking through this collapsing, dissolving maelstrom to stop him, and kind of successfully puts things back in order. So one little detail there is he said to Haber before he left, he was like, "Hey, I strongly recommend you say this like one magic word that I learned from the aliens.
Yeah.
Um, really, really recommend you do that." And then I think maybe he just figured Haber would do what he suggested, but he didn't. Maybe it's as simple as that. I'm
Yeah.
not
I
really
don't
sure.
I think that's exactly right. I don't understand why after an entire book's worth of dealing with Haber, he thought Haber would just be like, "Yeah, sure, fine, I'll do that." Like that's just not any of my mental models of who Haber is. Like I never ever would have sincerely believed he would have taken that advice and used it. So
Uh,
it is kind of confounding to me that George, if George truly believed that would happen. So what is the key of that? Right. So I think this gets us into our turtle aliens a little bit here. The concept expertly using, I think the reason I love this book is because it works a Beatles song into the climax. So any book that does that is always going to win with me.
uh,
But I guess the concept here, and I'm going to try to tie this back to our central metaphor, but the concept here is like one person cannot wield this power. They cannot control it. It is too much for them. The only way to do this with any kind of control or success is with a little help from your friends, is through communal support, and so like to extend that out to our metaphor, going back again to the great man of history idea that like one person cannot bring us to utopia. Like it is going to take all of us to advance the world in a generally good direction. Um, we cannot leave it up to one person or even a handful of people. I think that's right. I
yeah.
think.
Yes, that's definitely in there. That's kind of why he created his wife into existence, is he knew he couldn't do it himself. And so he created someone who could kind of help him in the way that he needed to be helped. And then the
Yeah.
turtles, I'm unclear on what role the turtles played in this, and I think we're meant to be. I think we're so like, because you vaguely get the idea that like maybe the turtles all have this ability, and maybe they're all sort of dreaming all the time,
I
and maybe the whole world is in fact constantly in flux from moment to moment, and we just look at whatever moment you're in right now, and you think, of course it's always been like this, and I have a whole life history,
I
and
mean, isn't that just life? Like
yes. That's a great point. I mean, that I think that struck me as one of the most beautiful like thoughts in the whole book, is this idea of maybe every day we wake up is like a new world, and but of course we don't know it because from our perspective, we've always been living in this world,
Mm-hmm.
and how would we know any different? Like, that's just like a very magical feeling notion that I don't think I've ever encountered before.
But yeah, I mean, there's like any country you live in, any place, any point in time you live in this world, there are people and things moving that will completely upend how everything works that you have no control over and indeed often no knowledge of, right? So yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's just true. Yeah, I mean, I think Aqualungfish is saying that the turtles are fully created from the dream, and George subconsciously worked an understanding of the dream power into them. I think that's exactly true. I think these are just like the text basically crafts them as these are people that all have this power. They
Mhm.
all have this power that he has, and so they understand it in a way and recognize it in him immediately. They just like see him, and maybe because they're like meeting him in the dream world each night and he's just not remembering it or something. But
Mhm.
um it's it's really interesting because yeah, I mean, again, these are people that like are teaching him how this works, but he made them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. My brain like splits in half when you say that, because I simultaneously agree with you that he definitely made them because he like manifested them
Yeah.
to solve the peace on earth problem. But he sort of did it, and he sort of did it like iteratively, where like the first version, they were definitely hostile,
Yeah.
and then he retconned it. Where one of them is lands and pulls out a gun, and then it's like talking out of its gun. It's like, this is my talking device that is always, I have always talked through the gun.
Oh, did you think that was a gun? Oh, my bad.
I can see how this would be confusing.
Yeah.
Um, but then at the same time, I'm like, well, then where the hell did the power come from? And then maybe it's like, well, maybe everyone has this power. Maybe everyone actually has this power. He's just the only one who remembers what what yesterday actually was like.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
um, I
I
don't
was
know.
kind of surprised that he actually was able to transfer the power. I mean, I guess that's always the way it had to go, but like there's part of me that just sees Haber as a joke, and that's not fair because he did actually invent these incredible things that were able to do things, but like it was just like there's no way that's going to actually work, right? But of course
Yeah,
it
I
did.
agree. Actually, I felt like it. I sort of felt like the story was building toward it just not working.
Mhm.
That he was going to lay down, and despite the fact that he had managed to build some kind of rudimentary lathe, um, it wasn't
That's
going to
so
work.
stupid.
Been trying to work that in for the last 45 minutes.
I'm very proud of you. I can't do the show now. I'm laughing too hard.
I love that no one got it except you.
Um,
Um,
yeah. Do y'all know where that's from? Do y'all know? Do y'all know where that's from?
we'll see if anyone knows. Um, yeah, I thought it wasn't going to work. I thought he was going to end up looking a fool. I had this picture in my mind of him, of it not working and him being enraged, and then Orr had just wished away his ability to dream. So, like, that's literally how I thought it was going to end.
Yeah.
Is Orr can't dream anymore. Haber's machine doesn't work. Problem solved. The dreaming has been removed from the world, which is kind of what Orr wanted, actually.
So did or didn't actually remove his ability to do this to effective dream though, right? Like that's I think that's what ultimately happens, right?
Oh, I guess you're right. Actually, I'm not sure is the truth.
Well, because I thought I'm not sure of the timeline here, but I thought he brings back. Does he bring back? No, he brings back the woman after or before he removes his dream. But no, no, because she like he kind of puts everything back together after Haber fucks it up. So
Right.
and that's after he's already lost the power. So I just don't think the method of just telling yourself you can't do it anymore. He actually dreamed a way to do that. So I just don't think that actually happened.
I think you must be right, but That's not what I thought when I read the book, but
Sure.
logically, I think he must be right. So
I like what William's saying. Did he really invent the turtles, or did George just dream them? Like, I love the idea that like maybe this wasn't an alien race that was fully created, full cloth, but just that his dream like brought these peoples across the stars, and then only later he changed them. I don't know. What do you think?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like that's a fascinating. Like that strikes me somehow as a deeply philosophical question, where it's like, it, can can we know that?
Mm,
What am I trying to say? Like, or maybe like, what's the difference? Like, if you're if they always existed in that timeline, then it's not like he created them. Well, so that's okay. So this is the thing I was thinking about is like, is or changing things, or is he just moving himself and whoever else is in the room into like a nearby Everett branch or whatever?
sure.
Uh,
Yeah, I mean, this is fun because it gets back to when he solves overpopulation by killing 6 billion people. He doesn't actually kill 6 billion people, right? They just,
mhm,
well, I mean, okay, but like they die, but like those people never existed in that time. You know, like
right,
it gets really weird and messy, actually.
right. And the whole thing was like turned on its head for me when we learned very late in the book that he's like, yeah, look, the reason why I'm kind of messed up is the first time this happened, it was because the world had ended.
Yeah,
There was a nuclear war, and I was starving to death. And I sat down and passed out, and then I woke up and I had quote unquote fixed everything. But that the consequence of that is I see all of this as a dream. Like
mm,
this all seems like a fantasy. The real world for me is the first world where everybody's dead.
yeah,
So the fact that I made 7 billion people and then I killed 6 billion of them, it all it feels like a video game to him at a certain point.
yeah. That's fair.
Um, I mean, that kind of makes him seem inhumane. Like I don't think that's it. It's just like,
Well, he's definitely affected by the deaths of those people.
yeah,
It's not like he's a monster, but yeah, it is so abstract and kind of weird, especially when, as you said, you're living in a world in which you're kind of running two different versions of yourself at the same time. One of which is like that already happened, and I've already processed that happening, and like it's just a part of my timeline now.
right. Yeah, like everyone just was like, oh yeah, my my parents and husband and everyone died in the plague. Um, and I have always that's just my life history now,
Yeah,
right? It doesn't feel like you did that. It just feels like that's what
yeah,
happened. That's always been what happened.
yeah.
Um,
So something we when we were talking about this with the turtle people specifically, William was actually talking about the machine. So
mm,
not that the machine just worked and that Haber is this brilliant inventor, but perhaps throughout the course of the dreaming, George made the machine do the
mm,
things that it could do.
mm,
And
maybe.
maybe ultimately that's even how Haber gets the dream power, is just, you know, George is told after you have this effective dream, I will understand things enough to get the dream power, and so that's what happens because
Yeah,
it's part of his dream.
because there is sort of a gray area between just like expecting something to happen and hypnosis. Like those are
Sure.
I my uneducated but you know layman's slash educated opinion on hypnosis is like the, really hypnosis is just pushing yourself into expecting something to happen,
Mm-hmm.
and the human brain is really good at twisting itself up when it actually expects something to happen. Like my favorite hypnotism demonstration, which actually is really easy to do, um, is like you just you can do this to yourself or someone else can do it, but like you just you stick your hands to the table and you can't lift your hands, and that's a perfect example because it's like, well, it's not like there's a magic force gluing your hand to the table. It's that you have so thoroughly set up the expectation that there's no way I can remove my hand from the table that you can't move your hand from the table. And that is nothing more than an expectation. So the reason I bring this up is like, yeah, maybe he just expects Saber's machine to work, and so it does. I actually like that idea.
Yeah. So I guess ultimately the big question I have here is, so I'm responding to Snarky Keys here, the universe is the sea and we're the jellyfish.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, is the takeaway from this book that Le Guin wants us to have this idea that utopia is an impossible myth, and even trying for it will lead to more destruction and suffering? It feels weird to just be like, so you know what we should just do? Not give a fuck anymore.
Yeah.
like is there suffering? Is that there? Are people dying? Are people starving? Is there evil in this world? Yeah, there is, but there's nothing we could do about it. Let's just go with the flow. Like, that doesn't feel right to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. I think I think her intention is to leave us with these questions and not answer them, but not to say, yeah, man, just go with the flow. Nothing matters. We're
Yeah.
nihilists. It reminds me of one of my other favorite books that we've ever covered, The First 15 Lives of Harry August, where there's this motif. I'm not going to spoil anything, but there's a repeating line, which is let uncertainty be your excuse for inaction, which I remember you hating then too.
Yes.
Because the idea there is like, you don't really know the consequences of your actions. And so even if you take well-meaning actions and try to save people or try to help people, it's not going to turn out the way that you think. And thus don't bother. I don't, that seems kind of obviously transparently wrong, and like just a very simple
Yeah.
way where it's like, if I prefer a delicious cherry pie to a punch in the face, um, I'm going to choose the cherry pie. I'm not just going to be like, whatever, either way.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, so like, that seems like a reductio, but it's like, well, that's basically what you're saying when you say, don't try to make things better. It's like, no, I'm going to go the way that makes it seem like things are going to get better based on my own expectation. And if there are negative side effects, there will be negative side effects, but like, I'm going to try to avoid them. And this is kind of all what we're doing together.
Yeah.
One thing you could say, I think this is actually an interesting rejoinder to this, is like, she wrote this in like 1971. Everyone was expecting a Malthusian hellscape and nuclear war, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone was like, the book is very much written from the perspective of someone who is looking at the future and seeing a likely nightmare. Okay. So 50 years later, I'm not saying the world is a utopia, but we have not had a nuclear war.
True.
And we have successfully lifted billions of people out of poverty.
True.
And reduced, yes, we still have hunger, but it's not a Malthusian hellscape.
True.
We've done a lot of good things.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of bad things have happened as well.
Sure.
So this to me sort of supports this idea of like billions of people collectively trying to do what seems like the best thing to do has kind of gradually made the world a better place.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I think kind of trying to glom onto some of this, the argument that Haber makes, right, is the idea that you're walking down a path, you see someone dying of poison, you have the antidote in your pocket, right? And it's like, how could you not act? And I think that is a very obvious and simple, like, thought experiment of, yes, of course you would act, like, of course you would, but that life is actually not that simple. I mean, and I think we see George Orr effectively reject that metaphor by the end of the book. He's just like, no, this is not that, actually. Like, that what we're talking about here is not an individual or even like local level of, I have the power and can help people. What we're talking about here is on some massive, existence-wide scale, rewriting the laws of nature and the universe in order to turn the current towards the thing we want. Like, it is not that the jellyfish doesn't do anything, right? Like jellyfish eat, they mate, they live, and they die. They are creatures. They just don't try to, like, they just go with the flow of the current. They still struggle and do everything else any other living thing on this planet does, but they're not trying to say, okay, let's make the current go left instead of right, because that is outside of their reach. That is outside of their power. They cannot do that. And okay, they don't actually accept that because they're jellyfish, but they're not worried about it.
Yeah. They're the perfect organism.
So I ultimately think it's I definitely get to the point where I really just reject the idea that the message is just don't worry about it, man. Just don't worry about it. No, I think the message is, if you see someone dying of poison and you have the antidote, give it to them. And if everyone on Earth collectively has that general sentiment, that is how we make things better.
Yes, I appreciate you reminding me of that, because I forgot about that exchange. And really what I just said a second ago was a sort of straw man, unfair straw man of Aura's position, where I think you're totally right that Aura's position is more nuanced, where it's Haber who is saying, like, look, it's clear, it's obvious, you just do the thing that's good. And Aura is saying, like, you don't actually understand what you're doing. And like you said, it's a matter of scale. I think that's maybe the fair kind of equilibrium point, is like, yeah, you do things that are good, but you do them at kind of the human scale, where you're actually helping specific people instead of trying to be the savior. And I do think that, it's funny. I remember a time many years ago when someone used the word utopianist as a pejorative, and I was baffled. I'd never heard it used that way before. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, how can it be bad to be a utopianist? Like, a person who wants the world to be great? Yeah, I'm a utopianist. And then I kind of, partially due to Le Guin books, honestly, was like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
The argument against utopianism is the idea that, like, if we just crank this knob harder, everything will be perfect. So help me crank the knob.
Yeah.
Or you're an enemy of everything that's good. It's a very totalizing way of thinking. Yes, a lot of hubris, as you have said, and as Barrett says in the chat.
Yeah, I mean, I ultimately go back to the Beatles, the greatest band of all time, and the song that says, "I get by with a little help from my friends." Right? I think the word choice is there, and I think the reason ultimately Le Guin included it in the book is because I get by, right? Like, what is getting by? It's not perfect, right? There's still suffering, there's still anguish and bad things in the world, but we get by. That's what we do. And I don't know. There's something really profound about that, I think.
I agree.
William is saying there was another George who insisted the past was obdurate. I think the universe is obdurate. Yeah, I mean, I think it is interesting that, like, you could maybe frame this as just the reason why everything was monkey pawing was just because the universe itself doesn't really like to be changed, and was genies wishing him for it. Yeah.
Yeah, it is funny that we've now referenced two time travel stories. Just to clarify for everyone, this is a reference to 11/22/63, and I was referencing the first 15 Lives of Harry August, which are two time travel stories which have a very similar idea, or posit a similar idea of, like, the danger of trying to fix all of the mistakes, right? Which that being in a time travel context, this being in a magical dreams context.
Yeah.
But, similar themes. Yeah.
Man, what a delightful book. I love Le Guin. How much more Le Guin do we have? She wrote a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I haven't read anything outside of the let's see, what else do we have?
Why is it so hard to find just a bibliography? Come on.
Seems like we've read a lot of her top ones, at least. So
yeah, I mean, we could. I'm actually, like, I like the Earthsea stuff a whole lot. I'm not, like, really, like really like pulling to read more Earthsea.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'll get there, but there's other stuff I wanna read first.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Anything else anyone else wanted to say? Or sorry, Matt, are you done?
I'm good. I think I said my piece.
All right. Really, really love this conversation. Thank you, Matt, and thank you everyone else. I really enjoyed this book, and this is one of those ones where I closed the book and was like, oh, this is gonna be a fun one to talk about.
Yeah.
It's always true with Le Guin for sure. So Bent Westward says, I just started watching a show on Apple TV called Mythic Quest. I have watched that show. There's a cameo by an actor playing Le Guin in a flashback, along with Asimov and Ray Bradbury. Yeah, I remember that episode too. That was a really good one. I think I dropped off that show after the second season, but people are still liking it. Okay, we are about to close the vote on. Let me just link the vote one more time. So people that showed up late can get their vote in. It was a very close vote on Patreon, so it's going to be interesting to see how this shakes out. Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot too. Thank you. All right, I'm going to hit refresh a few more times, give people some time. And then... Ooh, it was close. It was close. Oh, I broke it. Okay, we have a winner. A Canticle for Leibowitz. Matt has finally won. We've had this thing on the poll for so many months and years. Like, we've taken it off and given up on it. We've brought it back. It always kind of just sat there as just the runner-up, and it finally pulled off a victory. Barely. It looked for a bit like Battle Royale was gonna sneak up and put it in second place again, but it won. This is a book I've been looking forward to reading for a long time, so
me too.
I'm pretty excited about this one. And
we'll have done 2 months in a row of like classic sci-fi, so that makes me happy.
Yeah, me too. This is kind of what I envisioned the book club when we first started, is that there's a whole bunch of books that are on my I should probably read that list, but just wouldn't ever get around to it naturally on my own. And having this great thing with you and all these fine people to talk to. Matt the doll just moved, says Bent Westward. I don't believe you. Stop lying.
I'll have to watch the playback.
All right, folks. So yeah, we will be doing a Canticle for Leibowitz on the 28th of March, exactly 30 days from this very moment. It's weird. It's weird that because February is 28 days, that both February and March have the same day on the same day of the week. It makes me uncomfortable, and I don't like it.
Yeah, me too. It sucks.
But yeah, the 28th of March, we'll be back for A Canticle for Leibowitz. We are also continuing to cover Gerald's Game over on Flanagan's Wake. If you haven't checked that out, please do. We're having a lot of fun reading that book, and we will be wrapping it up within a couple weeks, and then moving on to the movie. And then after that, we've got Hill House, which is kind of the big one, the first big one for us in the Mike Flanagan series is Haunting of Hill House. We're looking forward to that a whole lot. So if you haven't checked out Flanagan's Wake, please do that. We're having a lot of fun over there. And make sure you're on YouTube right now. Watch the videos on YouTube. Not as much visual stuff for these book episodes, but for the movies, definitely we're cutting to clips. We're showing you guys what we're talking about. I think the movies are the best place to watch for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Hope you join us over there. In the meantime, if you like what we do here at Doof Media and you want to see more of it, then head on over to our Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia and consider donating to support our organization. At any available level, you'll get access to the vote for the books we talk about each month, as well as a bunch of other exclusive features. So yeah, go check it out.
Also, please, if you haven't already, please check out doofmedia.com, because it is new, it is improved, it is lightning fast. We're really happy with how this website turned out. We had a lot of complaints about the old website. The biggest complaint was that it was very slow. Loading pages took forever, and you couldn't really listen. It was very hard to listen to the show on the site if you wanted to do that. So this website is fast. It gets you everywhere you need to go, and we really like it.
Yeah, really appreciate the new website, and we hope you enjoy it too.
Yeah. Aqua Longfish says BioShock. Yes, absolutely. It is Art Deco. It is an Art Deco design, and it is really great. We're, I think, trying to work on some merch as well to fit the new Art Deco design. We're leaving our old logo. We love our old logo, but we're gonna get some more Art Deco-y, BioShocky stuff here.
That's right.
Yeah.
I just love the website because I remember back like before the internet became colonized by like cartoony sameness, and I get that there's probably some reason why that happened, but I feel like the internet used to be more beautiful and like unique and varied. And you go to different websites and be like, oh, this is a cool website. And when was the last time you went to a website and were like, oh, this website looks cool? It's like, no, they all just look like a WordPress theme.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just really happy to have such a unique and cool looking website.
Yep, me too. Yeah, Qualified Cornstarch, great seeing you. Thank you for coming. We really do appreciate it. We appreciate all of you. Thank you everyone for being here live. It's always so fun to get to talk with y'all. I feel like we've said this many times before, but podcasting is so often a very solitary thing. It's Matt and I sitting alone talking to each other. We know you guys are listening. We can see the numbers, but we don't get to interact with y'all directly too much. So we always love when we get to do it. That's part of the reason we do this book club.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. Well, that is going to do it. We're done for the next month. So we will be back on the 28th of March for a Canticle for Leibowitz. We hope to see you all there. Please come hang out. Until then, though, have a good last day of February, last moments of February, and enjoy your next month. We'll see you in 4 weeks.
See ya.
Bye.